There we go. Thank you.
All right. So good morning, everybody. A very warm welcome to our November Health and Wellness Committee meeting. I'm Ankita. I will be taking over as the Wellness Chair starting November. Unfortunately, Lily wasn't able to join us today, and I just want to say my goodbye to her. But she will be helping me making a good transition, a comfortable transition into the Health and Wellness Chair position. Today we are very privileged to have our guest speaker, Ms. Jessica Colson. She's the SRVUSD Coordinator for Social Emotional Wellness, and Jessica today will be helping us understand how the district is helping the students with their emotional well-being and what are the different services that are available at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. And also, she will also be discussing some of the most common issues that our students are facing today. So Jessica, over to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having us. I know that this is a really busy time of year. And so I also want to thank all of my colleagues who are on this call. I'll be introducing them as they are up to speak. My name is Jessica Colson. I'm the coordinator for SEL and for college and career readiness for the district. So I help support in both of those areas, which is a little bit interesting, but also not too far from my former role as a high school counselor, where we would deal with both of those things sometimes simultaneously with the same student. So I'm really excited to be here to talk about kind of what some of the things we're doing in the district, and really to have my colleagues highlight the work that they're doing, because they're the ones who are working with our students every day. Rajni, next slide, please. So for right now, we're going to do a very brief opening activity. We're going to start with 5-fingered breathing, which is just super simple. We can do it by ourselves. We can do it with our families and with our students. And it's just really to kind of bring down our heart rates and to just kind of keep us calm. So if you do feel comfortable, you can close your eyes, or if not, just sort of find a soft gaze in the distance, and you just hold up your hand, and you don't have to hold it all the way up, but just in a place that's comfortable for you. And you will inhale as you trace your finger up and exhale as you trace your finger down. And so just not at a very fast pace, but just inhale and exhale. And again, inhale and exhale, and inhale and exhale, inhale and exhale, in and out. Okay, thank you. And now I'd just like you to take a moment to think about something for which you're grateful. And that can be in the moment, it can be with your family, it can be something that has happened at work. So just take a couple seconds and think about something for which you are grateful or thankful. I think it's really important to take these moments, and that was a couple of minutes. And so if we can just do that, and to just kind of have a really brief reflection about what we're grateful for, that is an instant little mood booster, and that can maybe help us reset if we're frustrated, or if we're sad, or if we're angry. If we just remember one thing that we're grateful for, that is incredibly powerful. Next slide, please, Rajni. Okay, so today's agenda, we are going to talk about why are we here. I think we all pretty much know that. And we're going to go into a little bit about the history of our work, where we've been, and then highlighting the services where we are now, and then where we're hoping to go in the future and next steps, and then any questions. Okay, so why are we here? We know that, especially, I want to say that we're coming out of a pandemic, but we're kind of not out of the woods yet, that we all need a little bit of extra TLC. And I know that personally, for me, what I thought this school year would be like back in the spring and the summer has definitely not manifested itself. And as we've come back, our students and our colleagues and our parents in the community, everybody is still feeling that stress and that burden of having been at home for a year and a half, of having been having to help educate their students when they didn't think that they had to, having to deal with teaching in a mask all day long, with being in a mask all day long, not having the types of family gatherings and relationships that we used to enjoy pre-COVID. And so I think that everybody is carrying that collective stress with them. And we are seeing it come out in many different ways in our schools with our students and our adults. And so how can we kind of help shore up everybody and provide the support that they need? So Rajni, next slide. And this is just basically a very brief overview of how the science supports social emotional learning and why it's so important. This survey now, this meta-analysis is 10 years old at this point, but it still holds true that when students have strong SEL in their lives, and when all people do, quite frankly, we have increased social emotional skills. How do we interact with people? We have our improved attitudes about ourselves, about others, about school. So we just basically have a more positive outlook on life. There's positive classroom behavior, and there is, for people who are very concerned with grades and academics, an 11 percentile point gain on standardized achievement tests. So basically, when people are feeling comfortable and safe and can self-regulate, they have more success in all areas of their life. And then also in the final column with the red heading, the conduct problems and the emotional stress decreases. And so even if we can do little things like the breathing activity, that will help lower it, to like larger system-wide teaching and coaching of explicit strategies. I think all of these things are helpful. Okay, next slide, please. So the district has made this a priority with the strategic directions. Many of you are aware of these. They were sort of developed last year, and then the board adopted and approved them back in the late spring. They are equity, deep learning and innovation, social emotional well-being, shared leadership, stewardship of resources, and culture of responsiveness. And so my work with the educational services team and the direct work of many of the people in SRV who interface directly with students, so teachers, counselors, all other helpers, is really focusing on the equity, the social emotional well-being, and the deep learning and innovation. Those are the three that are sort of very forward-facing with students. Next slide, please. So the social emotional well-being strategic direction reads, SRVUSD is committed to creating and nurturing inclusive learning environments where all students, staff, and families feel deeply connected to their school community. For this year, we have 2 goals. The first one, Rajni, is to develop a shared commitment to a culture of wellness where every student's emotional health is respected and supported across the system. And then the second goal is to create and nurture instructional environments that prioritize students' social emotional well-being. So basically, setting the culture and setting the tone in our schools, in our classrooms, in our offices to make sure that students feel supported, they feel respected, and that they feel safe. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the history of our work and what's been happening in SRV. A few years ago, it's probably 4 or 5 at this point, there was a mental wellness task force. It was comprised of all community stakeholders. There were district and site admin, counselors, teachers, social workers, students, parents, and community members. And there were a handful of recommendations that came out of them. I think the 2 most notable ones are elementary school counselors, and we have one on here today to speak about her work, and then also wellness centers at the high schools. And so fortunately, both of those things have come to fruition over the past few years, and there are 2 people on here who will be speaking in greater detail to those things. We had a health and wellness committee that sort of came at the tail end of the first year of the pandemic and really worked to figure out what supports we could put in place for last school year when we began the year of remote learning. For several years now, we have had our counselors doing suicide prevention lessons at a few different grade levels throughout school to help students gain awareness of signs and how to advocate for themselves and others if they notice somebody is in distress. And then we have elementary SEL curriculum. It's called Sanford Harmony, that's being used in each of our 22 elementary schools. Okay, so now I'm going to start introducing all of my colleagues who will speak specifically to their roles at their sites. I'd like to introduce Trisha Leung. She is one of our new elementary counselors this year. She splits her time between Greenbrook Elementary and John Baldwin Elementary. And so she's here to speak about what the work that she and her other elementary colleagues are doing at their sites.
Thank you, Jessica. Hi, everyone. As Jessica said, I'm Trisha Leong, and I am one of the new hire elementary school counselors that the district has hired to add to the social emotional support at each elementary school site after what we've kind of all experienced as a really difficult year. So now I just want to introduce to you what the social emotional work we are all collaboratively doing at each school site in the district as elementary counselors. So the first thing is the Sanford Harmony curriculum. It is a social emotional based curriculum program that all of the elementary schools are implementing school-wide. The teachers are trained in the curriculum and implement the lessons in their classroom, which also include things like monthly read alouds. So each of the teachers, at least at my school sites, it's up to their discretion on the order that they're implementing the lessons and when they implement them within their schedule. This program really teaches students the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that really help them develop their own identity and also to be able to create those meaningful relationships with their peers and adults on campus and at home. So this is implemented at like a tier 1 level because it's school wide, and I'll go into the tiers in the next slide. So also this school year, we've also implemented 2 social emotional based screeners. The first one was a 5-question wellness survey that helped us identify individual students that are feeling about how they're feeling about school this year, academically, socially, and emotionally. It really allowed us to really target those specific students that may be struggling in one or more of those areas and do like a personal check-in with them, which is really helpful. That way we could really outline and identify like what tier level of intervention they need and what we can do to support and increase their sense of wellness at school. The second screener that we implemented was a 16-question survey to measure their joy of learning, school connectedness, their educational purpose, and academic efficacy. This data is more so being used to guide our interventions within like the classrooms and school-wide throughout the entire school year. So it's a longer-term intervention-based like guide for us to use. This also it's up to each school site to determine like how they want to approach this because all of our populations look very different. And then lastly, there is the Healthy Kids Survey, which is an every year survey that is implemented. And it measures the school climate, healthy behaviors, and youth resiliency. So this is more of an anonymous survey conducted each school year to determine the staff direction and supporting students as well. And then with all of the data from each screener, it has really like helped us as elementary counselors to continually build and like shape the counseling programs that we're establishing at each school site to best support our student population and determine the best types of interventions that we think may be useful at each school site. We're all using it in the same way, but all of our programs may look a little bit different just because all of our school sites are very different. Like at John Baldwin and Greenbrook, like they're 5 minutes away from each other, and the populations are actually pretty different, and the schools are very different. So I'm seeing that difference already in those school sites. So then one of those types of interventions also includes like positive behavior supports. So these positive behavior support plans really outline the support and strategies that help that is implemented by team members. So that includes teachers, counselors, school psychologists, anyone on campus pretty much to help reduce the occurrence of like a problem behavior through positive and proactive means. So something kind of like a sticker chart that can be used in the classroom or in a counseling session where students are able to earn a sticker each time they do like an appropriate behavior. And then that is the positive reinforcement that they are earning so that they are learning that these are the behaviors that I should be doing. All right, and then next slide, please. So this is the social emotional tiers of support. I really consider social emotional support at the elementary level as earlier intervention. And earlier intervention is really like being able to identify and provide early support to students, whether that's academically or social emotionally, in within their stage of development. The tiers give us the guideline of assessing what level of support and what intervention we need to provide to prevent problems from happening or address the need that before the problem really starts to get worse. So what do the tiers of support look like for social emotional learning? I created this tier chart for as like a representative of what it looks like. So tier one, which is at the very bottom, that is implemented school-wide. So it can be school-wide initiatives such as like the No Place for Hate culture at the school, Sanford Harmony curriculum, like I talked about before, and social emotional skills and tools being taught in the classroom by teachers or any push-in lessons through like the school psychologist or counselor. It also can be something as simple as like a whole class meeting or morning meetings within the classroom to do like quick check-ins. So these lessons and skills are being taught school-wide, which will reach about 80 to 90% of the student population. Within the tier two, it is more so working in small groups, anywhere between 2 to 6 students. So that more so targets 5 to 15% of the student population. And students that join small groups are really getting more of a strategic and targeted support through short-term intervention. Some examples of that may be like a friendship group where students are learning what it means to be a friend and learning conflict management skills, or maybe like coping with anxiety, being able to identify how we're feeling and learning some coping skills to deal with it when it comes up and being able to utilize those tools. Then we also have our program called the Rainbow Room program, which is supervised and run by the district school psychologist, Renee, who oversees paraprofessionals at each school site that implement the program. And then at the tier two level or tier three level, sorry, tier three supports are interventions that are in a one-on-one setting where students get individualized intervention to address specific needs. And that will reach roughly 1 to 5% of the student population. This support at the elementary level includes our skip counselor. They are a clinical mental health professional from this Discovery Center, which our district is partnered with, and they see students for one-on-one sessions for more of a longer term counseling. We also have support through student support teams, 504s, or individualized education plans, which a lot of our school psychologists help with and are very involved with. And then there is also us as the school counselors who provide a little bit more of a short-term counseling intervention as opposed to the skip counselor. And then we also have I like to include like our speech services because our speech services, they always include social emotional lessons within their work as well. So they're always teaching them social skills and how to work within a group or how to interact with other kids on campus. So within their work, they're also doing a lot of social emotional work. So basically, like all in all, the main difference between the tier 1, 2, and 3 interventions is really the frequency of support and the level of individualized services that are being provided for the students. So through my work, I am continually evaluating students and determining what level of services they need and really being able to place them among the tiers to see what support they need. My colleagues at all of the other elementary sites also have like a very similar process, but it also just depends on what the support team they have at their school site and how they are handling that process. But overall, we are using the same framework and being able to use the same process to kind of determine what that looks like for in terms of support for the students. So that's really the overview of our work as elementary counselors.
Thanks, Trisha. Next up, I'm going to introduce Nancy Mahoney. She is a middle school counselor at Los Cerros Middle School, and she is a longtime counselor in our district. So she's here to share about middle school supports and interventions.
Good morning. I should just say everything Trisha said. So I'm not going to read the whole slide. I just want to highlight a couple of things. We do have a skip counselor as well at each of our middle schools. We have that person for 2 days a week. At Los Cerros, our skip counselor is currently at maximum capacity, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. We, like Jessica mentioned, we do our signs of suicide presentation for all 7th grade across our 8 middle schools. We also provide a staff mental health training annually that's based on the mental health first aid training I think Jessica referred to. You'll see that calm rooms is also listed here. This is going to be something similar to the wellness rooms at the high school, and we're going to be piloting it here at Los Cerros. I know through our MTSS coordinator that all of the middle schools have purchased the supplies, but right now we're just coming up with the guidelines and the requirements for the use of the calm room. The classroom presentations for kind of that tier 2, like Trisha mentioned, those cover everything from digital citizenship to suicide prevention to academic strategies, including SMART goals, executive functioning. We do also use the California Healthy Kids survey and the wellness survey that the district asked that we administer to kind of come up with a plan. I did poll all of the other middle school counselors, and we're all essentially seeing the same challenge this year with our kiddos. And I would say the top 3 that are kind of common among all the middle schools: anxiety and depression, gender identity, and behaviors. So those are all we really feel like an impact from remote learning and the pandemic.
Thank you, Nancy. Next up is Raji Niger. She is a school counselor at Doherty Valley High School.
Good morning. I'm gonna kind of echo, what Nancy and Trisha said. A lot of the things they're doing at the elementary, middle school level is carried over to high school, but obviously more age appropriate for high school. Each high school counselor provides kind of 3 main umbrellas of services: academic, social, emotional, and college and career support to roughly 400 students and families. And so for academic counseling, what that looks like could be interventional support in terms of if students are not performing well or struggling in some of their classes. And this could be in the form of SSTs, 504s, communicating a lot with students and teachers and being that middle person to help a lot of our students communicate with teachers, especially at the high school level. Pointing students to their academic resources, whether that's tutoring, whether that's using Access, how to utilize their resources on campus. And then a lot of the academic support at high school is obviously making sure students are on track for graduation and any post-high school plans. And so we evaluate their transcripts, their course selections, and really help to ensure that they're on track for their own goals after they leave high school. Social emotional, as many of my colleagues have mentioned, is really big this year as students are coming back to school from over a year of remote learning. And so this could be individual counseling, peer mediation, group counseling, crisis counseling for students who are at risk or in crisis, risk assessments for suicide, and then coordinating accommodations and services for students who may be out for medical reasons or mental health reasons, and really being that liaison as they transition back to school for whatever reason that they're out. And then obviously referrals to mental health resources if they need more than what the school can provide during the school day. This year, we're also doing a lot more. We're trying to get out in the classrooms a lot more. So we're doing workshops for students around different topics, around stress, anxiety, especially with finals coming up for students this year being the first year in person that they're doing it. A lot of workshops for parents as well, so they can help their students at home and recognize some of the things that they may be going through socially, emotionally at school, and how to be college and career. This is also a big one for high school, helping students kind of explore their interests. Our Naviance is our resource that we use for college and career planning. So starting to get them familiar with that early on, and then using it more in junior and senior year to target their specific post-high school plans. And then counselors do a lot with one-on-one meeting with students and recommendations as well to help them hopefully get into whatever post-high school college they hope to go to. Some of the things Nancy mentioned as well at the middle school level and high school, we're definitely seeing more social emotional concerns related to anxiety, depression, stress and anxiety is big, related to academic stress, and also being back or kind of still going through a pandemic. A lot of these things are exacerbated because of that. And a lot of it is due to some more uncertainty around what high school looks like for them, still figuring it out, life after high school, changes in home environment as families still adjust. And then as we've seen difficulty reintegrating back to school, whether it's socially, communicating with their peers again, being in a classroom full of 30 students again, as opposed to on screen. And so these are some of the things that we're seeing as a need this year in working at the high school level. Let me mute and then go.
Thanks, Rajni.
Mhm.
Okay, so unfortunately, I was not able to have a school psychologist join us. So I'm going to speak briefly to this slide. We have school psychologists at each level. As Tricia mentioned initially, we have one who oversees the Rainbow Room program for the district, and then we have other school sites who are assigned to different sites, and then also to the mental health collaborative and more intensive supports for students. So at the sites, they collaborate with the SST teams. Sometimes they're called a care team or a cost team. It's basically just to discuss students who might need additional supports. I think at the elementary level, they are much more sort of widespread in who they work with and the supports that they provide, just because there are fewer employees at the elementary schools than there are at a larger comprehensive high school. And so when you get into middle school and especially high school, the school psychologist's primary focus is on assessing students who have been recommended for a special education assessment, and also working with those students who have those types of school-based emotional supports written into their IEP plans. So they also serve as the leads on our crisis teams. If there's ever, unfortunately, a crisis at a school, if a student is harmed or dies, or even a staff member, then our mental health support providers, counselors, social workers, and psychologists are arranged into teams, and they are essentially deployed to a site to support and have additional mental health resources on site for that event, however long it takes. Unfortunately, at Doherty, when I was still working there, we had one, and we had crisis teams in place for the better part of a week in order to help us support our students. And then they also help out with the suicide prevention planning of the presentations that Nancy mentioned that happen at grades 7 and 9 and are going to start happening at grade 5. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to introduce Rochelle Goldenberg. She is one of our social workers who is working in the Cal High Wellness Center. Rochelle has a lot of experience in our district, both as a community member as well as a former school counselor. And so she's moved into this position. And so she's going to talk about the social workers and also a little bit about our wellness centers.
Oh, hi, my name is Rochelle Goldenberg. As Jessica said, I actually started out with the district as a parent, and then I moved into substitute teaching, trying to see whether I wanted to leave my policy work in social work to work in the school district. I took a position as a school counselor for the last 5 years, and then I just moved into the social worker position in the wellness center because it's what I really wanted to do. There are a lot of different things that social workers do through the district, and we're kind of like that mysterious thing that a lot of people don't know exists that we have. So you may be wondering, what do social workers do in the district? Well, we all provide mental health services. We serve students all the way from TK through 12th grade, and even some of the students that are beyond 12th grade that are retained after they hit their 18th birthday to 21. We address a lot of the increased needs of the students and families. The reason that we've grown from one social worker, I think about 8 years ago, to now 9 of us, is the fact that there are increased needs for students and families when it comes to mental health, as well as resources and every other challenge that we have here in the Bay Area, especially in our region. Social workers provide parent education. We also provide, we have a specific social worker, but all of us support foster and homeless youth. But we do have a designated social worker that works with foster and homeless youth and works with foster home programs. We partner with social services, and we partner with community organizations as well to help families in need. Every year we different lists. We just finished our list for Thanksgiving turkeys and dinner for families in need. We're currently looking for references. So if you know a family in our district that is in need of help for the holiday season, especially anytime at this time of year or at any time, you can reach out to the social worker either at your elementary school, your middle school, or your high school to have us get in contact with that family and see if they're in need and help connect them to resources that we have. We also provide a variety of different kinds of services for students. From if we know a student that can't get to school, we can get them a bus pass. If we know a student had their bicycle stolen, their family can't afford to replace it, and that's their way to get to school, we can find ways of having that replaced as well. So we do a variety of different kind of social services for families that are in need in our district. And believe it or not, we have quite a few families that are in need. We work with a couple of local organizations to bring in resources as well. And then we do student wellness checks. So for example, if there's a student who's not attending school, or if there's a student where we think that there's something going on, that this family needs support, we do have social workers that can go to the home and check in on families and students to see what we can do to help them. We also do truancy intervention and home visits for that as well. So we have 9 different social workers that are in 3 different tracks, technically 2 tracks, but in reality, we have one social worker that kind of walks a line between the 2. For feeder pattern social workers, those are the district social workers that travel between elementary, middle, and high school within a feeder pattern. So this includes our foster homeless liaison. We have one for each of the high schools. So for example, in my feeder pattern, we have Michelle Dooner, who is our district social worker. She's here right now in the room right next to me, behind me. And then we have 3 other social workers assigned to the other high schools. We have one site-placed alternative education and virtual academy social worker. She kind of works that fine line in between. She's assigned at a place, but she also deals with all of the stuff outside, the remote learners else within that school. And then there are 4 site-placed wellness center coordinating social workers like myself. So we can go to the next slide. I'm going to put a link in the chat box for anybody who wants to check out the Wellness Center at California High School. I do have a link, so feel free to take a look. But the wellness centers are kind of a new idea within the district. The California High Wellness Center is the first one to be fully established. We've been operating technically for about 3 years with an actual full wellness center program, because during COVID, it was kind of hard to run a wellness center in the way that we would run one. We've been operating very actively though for the last 3 years. Doherty has been operating almost as long. Monte Vista and San Ramon Valley started to open in the middle to end of last year, but San Ramon Valley really didn't get their opportunity to get started until this year. So they're in the process of fully opening. At California High School, for example, we at the end of last month had 2,700 visits of students. 1,500 of those have been therapeutic visits, meaning students that come in crisis or come in because they need a mental health break. And that was serving 285 students who had signed in. Now you're wondering, where does that 2,700 go to the 1,500? Well, there's 1,200 are just students who come in during lunch or brunch to take a short break. So in addition to the services during the class periods, we also have opportunity for students to utilize a center space during non-class times. So I know there are a couple of questions about like, how do you prevent people from misusing and everything else. Students come in, if they're not meeting for a crisis and meeting with me or one of the therapists that's on site, they come in for just a short 15-minute wellness break. They sign in, they get a pass from class, they come down, visit us. At the end of the time, we track the amount of time they were here, and then we send them right back to class after their 15-minute break, just to get a breather, for an example. At Doherty High, they've had 372 visits as of October with 138 therapeutic referrals from teachers. And at Monte Vista, they've had about 23 visits altogether with 102 therapeutic visits. So you may wonder why the numbers are so different. It's just because California High School, the location of where our wellness center is, and the fact that we've been operating for a lot longer than the other programs have. Let's see, we also coordinate referrals and provide mental health services to students on campus, and we were doing it remotely. We're not doing that remotely now, but if we were ever to have to go remote again, we would. We do some classroom presentations regarding mental health, community resources, and wellness center services themselves. We also have information for on-campus workshops where students come into the wellness center, and we are also doing for community building. So we're offering some workshops to parents and community in the wellness centers. That's a developing program. We shall share our resources to other sites, and we also do presentations like this to PTSA. Just as an example for what we're doing right here at California High School, I did give you a link to the website. We have a variety of different supports that are available to students, not just when they're here, but also tools that students use when they're home. So we have links on all of our websites and our emails to emergency services after hours. There's also a variety of tools on the California High website, for example, for things like guided meditation can use at home, or sounds and music, visual relaxation, different smartphone apps, different puzzles and tools, even podcasts, and links to an organization called the Cameron's Collection. We partner with our library to provide mental health resources confidentially to students. The other piece about the Wellness Center is the Wellness Center is, while it's a mental health program, it is put out to students as a place that you can come for a break. It's literally, we put it out as a reset break. So students can come in without stigma or without wondering. Some students just come in because they want to take 15 minutes to play a puzzle. Other students come in because they have mental health issues and they need help, whether they need help finding a resource, whether they are at risk of harm. It could be a wide variety of reasons that students will wander into the Wellness Center, but it's a space created so that it's just a place that's okay to. It's open to all students, whether you're in special education, whether you're the 4.0 student, if you're a cheerleader, if you're a football player, if you're the quiet student, if you're, and it's all open to teachers if they need support as well. At least that's how we operate here. Each of our centers is operating a little bit differently because we're all in the process of developing our programs. But if you would like to have a peek at some of the services available, wellness centers, you can check out the website for California High School. I have a bunch of things on there. We do also do classroom presentations, I mentioned, but we do presentations during student support periods as well. So different small groups for groups of students, from everything from stress reduction to mindfulness to assertiveness to actual discussions on mental health topics.
Thank you so much, Rochelle. Next up is our student support counselor, Jessica Gilmore, who has been at Monte Vista for the last few years. And this is, I think, a really unique position that we have in that our student support counselors don't have academic caseloads like Rajni described for her situation. And so this really puts student support counselors in a great place to be able to help students and to also work with the social workers in the wellness centers. So Jessica, I'm going to let you take it.
Thanks. Good morning. I'm Jessica Gilmore. So I'm at Monte Vista. And like Jessica just mentioned, it really is a unique position that the support counselors have. So there's one at each high school, and our primary focus is social and emotional support. So, if students are stressed about academics, we can help them as well, but the primary focus is social emotional. It's a lot of individual counseling, either ongoing support or crisis situations. So we have regular caseloads of students. I have a small handful that I see weekly, a large amount that I see every other week, and then a huge amount that I see monthly. So it's a lot of regular kids, but then also the kind of drive-by crisis situations that are going on. And for risk assessments, they're usually either coming from my caseload, or I'll double up with the alphabet counselor so that we can tag team, and then reentry meetings as well. So a lot of individual support. And then we also do the mental presentations in the classrooms, like Nancy Mahoney mentioned, for 7th graders. So we have 11th and graders in addition to staff. And so those are the suicide prevention presentations. Collaborating with our wellness center team. So each wellness operates a little bit differently. So a big focus for ours right now is getting group counseling going. So different various needs that students have. And our social worker in the wellness center is running groups currently. And then also, since our wellness center social worker does not have a caseload, we really collaborate to see if students are coming in more regularly to the wellness center for that kind of therapeutic support. Then our wellness center social worker will reach out to me and the alphabet counselor to see how we can best support this student, because they're seeming to need more ongoing support. So whether it's me or my intern or the skip counselor, really linking up those students to get the support that they need. And then also liaison to the feeder pattern social worker too, who have a lot of our families. So making sure that they've got what they need, we can best support them on campus, and then on the days that they're here, they can support the students. And then our SWIT team. So as Jessica mentioned previously, so SWIT, same as cost, care, SST teams, all of those teams for intervention purposes. So whether it be academic intervention, social, emotional, behavioral, whatever the case may be. We meet once a week as a team. It's kind of like the behind the scenes before those SST meetings, and kind of collaborate and determine what the best interventions could be for those students in need. Working with the middle school counselors. So a lot of the majority of our students come from our own feeder patterns. So I think I'm constantly in communication with Jill Cruz at Bella Vista and Nancy Mahoney at Los Cerros, and really working with them, whether it be for our freshmen who recently came from there, or if they've got siblings there for our students here. So in constant communication and support for our families. And then also when we hit towards spring, making sure that we help with the transition for 8th to 9th grade students. So all of our incoming 9th grade students. And then I think that's pretty much it. And then also we have a couple of mental health clubs on campus. So the one that I'm an advisor to is Bring Change to Mind. They work at breaking down the negative stigma that's associated with mental health. They help also pair up with the wellness center for different activities, weekly lunchtime activities that everybody's welcome to, and helping along with like Mental Health Awareness Week and different specific days too.
Thank you so much. Okay, so now we're going to go on to assessing needs and next steps. And next slide, please, Rajni. So like many of the presenters mentioned, we have been doing brief surveys and screeners. We did one last spring for TK through 12. It was about 6 or 7 questions, depending on the grade level. And then in the fall, there was a revised version of that, 5 questions for TK through 5. And that was just so schools could get a pulse on how students were doing and assess needs to support students who were in moderate or high concern areas for crisis. this fall in October, we did a 16-question wellness screener that Tricia mentioned that was administered to grades 3 through 12. And it measured 4 different subcategories: joy of learning, school connectedness, academic efficacy. And the follow-ups for that are, like Tricia said, the data from that is being used to inform larger sort of system-wide interventions and focus areas for schools to support students. It was a wellness screener, so there were no red flag crisis questions on it that would warrant an immediate check-in. For example, a student saying that the risk of them going home and harming themselves is high. Those types of questions were not on the wellness screener. That screener will be administered again in the spring. There are certain sites that are wishing to do it more frequently because that is their focus area for the year. Not that we all shouldn't be focusing on SEL, but each site has targeted goals with specific areas, and some sites are wanting to have the 16-question screener go out a little bit more frequently. So all of this is coming together in a really great way to provide data to help us support basically what we have known all along about our students, that they are struggling and that they need help, some of them. And here is some more information that can kind of help us figure out how to support them more specifically. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have started the work of bringing together all of the different helpers in the district, that's school counselors, support counselors, psychologists, and social workers, to figure out where the work overlaps, where the work supports each other, and to sort of streamline how we do work together in order to more effectively serve students. We are looking to increase, I think the student workshops have really been increasing during school, but the parent workshops, we definitely could partner with the SRV Council of PTAs to have more increased parent workshops. Site wellness activities are happening formally and informally. And then, like my colleagues mentioned, connecting students with available resources. And we always want to be able to explore ways to get more resources and supports. There was a District 2 meeting on Monday night. Candace Anderson hosted it. They are starting to form, I believe if it wasn't formalized last night, I think it will be imminently, the Office of Social Justice and Racial Equity, and they are looking at supporting the mental health needs of students in all of District 2, which is Candace Anderson's area, and we are one of the school districts within that area. So she is bringing in more mental health supports through this office. And then also the Contra Costa County of Education has brought in a new position of a wellness liaison, a wellness coordinator who has liaisons who will be reaching out to all the schools in Contra Costa County. So there is additional help coming, and people are responding as a result of the needs. So it's just figuring out how to coordinate and channel all of these resources and how each different group can help support each other. Next slide, please. So that's basically our presentation. I did get a list of questions from Lily. I think that many of them have been addressed over the course of the presentation, but I did want to address a couple of the ones that were more focused on behavior issues and questions about substance abuse. What is the current policy if a student is found with an illicit substance at school, i.e. a vape pen, marijuana, tobacco, alcohol, etc.? Are they suspended, in school suspension, etc.? So this, I have to be honest, this is not my purview. So I did have to reach out for help on these questions because I do not do student discipline. So I'm reading off the responses. So I'm going to say, if there is THC or marijuana involved, suspension may be issued, but that could include an alternative to suspension. It could be educational, if they engage in educational through the Discovery Center, that can reduce the suspension by a day. Generally, for other offenses, we really try to have alternatives to suspension and not try to suspend on the first offense. And then prior to the pandemic, there was a significant number of confiscated vape pens at all high schools. Is this still as large of an issue? It is still an issue, but fewer incidents have been reported. And then at the high schools at the beginning of the year, and I think even a little bit at the middle schools, perhaps there was reports of like TikTok challenges and vandalism. What measures were taken at the high schools? So many site principals were proactive and sent letters to their communities about the Devious Licks Challenge to educate parents and students about it. There were no reports of violence, but there were reports of vandalism, mostly focused on damage to restrooms and other school property, unfortunately. Has the district considered excusing absences for students needing a mental health day? Yes, we have, and we have communicated to office staff on how to mark attendance records when a parent or guardian calls in. And I believe that the rest of the questions were addressed through the presentation. So I know that I do want to be cognizant of time, and I know that we have a couple of minutes left. So if anybody has any questions, we are happy to take them.
Jessica, thank you so much. And I want to thank everybody, Trisha, Rajni, Nancy, Rachel, Jessica Gilmore, for your precious time and elaborating in such details about the interrelatedness of mental health. And I know it is so complicated, when you are talking about behavioral health, emotional health, mental health. Just one question for you, Jessica. How do you think that PTA can help you maybe just become like a liaison between the parents and all the work that you all are involved with? How do we communicate in the best possible way so that the parents also know that we have so much available, so many resources that you all have already in place?
I think that's a great question. And I really appreciate that you're willing to help us get the word out. I think the best place to start is with your individual site PTA boards, because the needs and the personalities of the communities are so different that what might work at one site might not be as effective at another site. I do know that last year during the pandemic, there was good success with doing feeder pattern presentations to have more of that vertical alignment, especially if families had students at multiple levels. So that could perhaps involve a little bit of coordination with each of your site representatives in the feeder patterns to really just engage in that dialogue, not just with the principals, but I think with people represented on this call, because I do know that, like, when I was at Doherty, I did a couple of PTA presentations, and that seems to be an incredibly helpful, and for not to diminish it at all, but a very easy way to get information out to a large subset of parents in a very engaging, effective manner. And that was pre-COVID, where it was in person, a nice presentation in the library, or I did one in the Commons one year. But I think that really starting at the sites is the best way to begin, because while we all have different we do have different needs, and we're doing similar things. We're doing the same things, but in a little bit of a different way.
True. No, thank you. That would work. And I would, really want to work together with all of you so that we can get the message across and give, all the help. I remember meeting with the MVHS counselors, and I know a lot of my friends, my daughter is a sophomore in MVHS, and the parents have an idea that the counselors are only there to help them with academics. But I don't think parents realize that that's a resource that the kids can actually really make use of and benefit from them. So that's one thing that I want to really get the message across.
I have a quick question if you have a minute.
Sure. Please go ahead.
All right. Hi, Jessica. I'm representing Neil Armstrong. Might be a novice question, but how do parents access SEL resources at elementary schools? Is there a way to do it without going the 504 or IEP route?
So I think that kind of depends on what you're looking for, right? And definitely not most of our students do not need a 504 or an IEP. And to clarify, the 504s and IEPs are really for specific reasons where students are unable to, there is some sort of deficiency, whether it is an academic one or a social emotional one or a physical limitation that prevents them from performing at the same level as their peers. And so we always try to provide like the least restrictive environment for students with regard to those supports. But with regard to general SEL supports, I think at the elementary level, a good place to start would be reaching out to your principal and your school counselor. And I do know that Jared is great with the SEL supports. And I just feel like he's like this big warm teddy bear that's like running around campus all the time. And yeah. And so, and also the teacher, right? So the teacher will know what is going on with your student, because the teacher sees your student sometimes for more waking hours than you do every day, unfortunately. And so I think just opening that dialogue with the teacher, if you have any concerns or you need any supports, is a really good place to start. And then maybe working with Jared, and then Ariane Regato is your school counselor, and she would be also another good resource.
Excellent. So there's school counselors on site that can be accessed
2.5 days a week, right? So the best way to get in touch with them is to email, because generally they do 2 days at one site, 3 days at the next, and then the following week they'll be 3 and 2. So they like to kind of split Wednesdays in some fashion.
Excellent. Thank you so much. This was in the same vein. I know a lot of parents, they don't think about mental health services as being preventative, and that's the message I'm trying to get out, about how it can be helpful. You don't need to have a deficit in order to access them.
Right. And I know that Jared would welcome support in that area. So if you wanted to coordinate a little parent information evening, and then, Trisha did a very similar presentation. She like the tiers of support that was part of an SEL presentation that she did at one of her sites a couple of weeks ago it was the PTA, right, Trisha? Yeah, so it's to the PTA meeting. So that's something that is entirely, I think, a valid ask. And if you wanted to reach out to the Greenbrook PTA person, they sort of helped coordinate that with Rhea Murphy, the principal at Greenbrook. And so that is a really good way to get this information out, that it is preventative at tier 1, where this is happening in the classrooms.
Absolutely, especially now post-pandemic, when you see a lot of stuff in the playground and you're like, yeah, maybe they could have a group, or maybe they could have some kind of a fun thing that can address all of that without really making a big deal out of it.
Right, exactly.
All right, thank you so much, Jessica.
And then I do know that Nancy she has a book that might be helpful. So Nancy, go ahead.
Thank you. So I get no profits from this, but it's called Come Back Kids. I don't know if you hopefully get it. And it's on Amazon. It's a super easy read. I was hoping for something like this as soon as the pandemic was over, because what we're seeing at Los Cerros is that I feel all the parents just thought they would put the kids on the bus and everything would go back to normal. And it's not that way. And this book it says a lot of the things that my philosophy is as a counselor. So it really resonated with me. And it's just called A Pocket Guide to Post-Pandemic Parenting. So, and like I said, you can get it on Amazon, but that's a little quickie tip for the families.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this. I will make sure that this information gets included in the email so that everybody has an access to this. No, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. I know we are at the top of the hour. It's 10:30. Thank you so much for your valuable time and the beautiful presentation. I'm sure a lot of people would benefit from this, and we'll make sure that we get, as PTSA, we would try and get the word out as much as we can. Thank you so much. And for everybody who's still here, I will be in touch for the next meeting. I will email soon with the date and the time for the next wellness meeting. And just wanted to wish you all a very, very happy Thanksgiving break. And Jessica Colson, again, a very big thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. Have a good break, everyone.